How are you guys doing? Today is Sunday, June 6th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an individual profile on DeAndre Hopkins. The elite starting wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals turned 29 today, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm just going to go through his accolades, his achievements, and everything that he's been able to accomplish as a football player since he's hit like the national stage to where he is right now. And just to give you a little bit, I think just by going through it and going through the context, I think that it'll provide justification and a good understanding as to why he is one of the most elite athletes to play the wide receiver position, a very tough position to be elite in the NFL. To give a little bit of background, DeAndre Hopkins, if you've never heard of him, he's about 6'1", 212 pounds. He has some of the best hands you'll ever see, great separation. He's one of the best, most complete receivers you'll ever find, and that's a lot coming. I don't say a lot coming from me, but he's a very talented wide receiver, and I cannot wait to watch him this year. Is the most that's all I'll say for now. So he originally came out of South Carolina, born in Clemson, by the way. But it's South Carolina, in Central South Carolina. He would establish himself as one of the best young football prospects in the nation, and he would go on to play for in-state Clemson for, I believe, Dabo Swinney. This is when Dabo Swinney first took over. So DeAndre Hopkins' his freshman season would have been his 2010 season. In 2010, he would play all 12 games in a season where the Clemson Tigers finished with a 6-7 record. They would go to the Minky Car Care Bowl and lose to South Florida. This is the only losing season Dabo Swinney has ever had as a coach, by the way, and they only had a losing record because they lost the bowl game. Regardless, in this season, DeAndre Hopkins would finish with 52 receptions in those 12 games for 637 yards and 4 touchdowns, which for a freshman playing for Clemson is a pretty big deal, even if Clemson wasn't the best team. To be a freshman and to get all those reps, it really said something. Following the year in which they didn't really win, the next year for his sophomore season, DeAndre Hopkins would go on to play 14 games in a season where the Clemson Tigers would finish with a 10-4 record under Taj Boyd as their quarterback. They would go on to lose in the Orange Bowl to West Virginia as they lost 70-30. It's not worth saying what the score was, but West Virginia scored 70 on them. They would finish ranked as the 22nd ranked team that year. DeAndre Hopkins would finish with 72 receptions for 978 yards and 5 touchdowns. So, of course, you can see him steadily increasing his ticks, especially as a sophomore. Not many sophomores are able to produce 978 yards for any team, especially Clemson. And then following that, his junior season in 2012, he would go on to play 13 games in a season where the Tigers finished they finished 11th in the rankings. They would go on to finish with an 11-2 record as they beat the LSU Tigers in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. But in the season itself, Hopkins would finish with 82 yards for 1,405 receiving yards, and he had 18 touchdowns. This is, of course, a season where Taj Boyd balled out, but just under half of his touchdowns went to DeAndre Hopkins. And then after the Tigers finished as a top 10 team, and after DeAndre Hopkins would establish himself as one of the best young wide receivers in football, he would get taken with the 27th pick of the first round of the 2013 draft. The 2013 draft that just happened to feature, Tavon Austin. Tavon Austin was actually the only wide receiver selected ahead of DeAndre Hopkins this season. But just right now, that's what that draft was looking like. But following the draft, he would start his career with the Houston Texans in 2013 for his age 21 season. And in his age 21 season, he would go on to start all 16 games for a Houston Texans team that finished with a 2-14 record, actually. They had the worst record in football. They were switching between teams. It was really a lot. That was the year before they drafted Jadeveon Clowney. context. But DeAndre Hopkins in that season would finish with 52 receptions for 800 yards and then 2 receiving touchdowns. He wouldn't necessarily get named. He wouldn't be named Rookie of the Year, but he was named to the All-Rookie team. Following that year, like I said, the Texans would get the first pick in the draft, take Jadeveon Clowney, and then 2014 they'd be back. In his age 22 season in 2014, DeAndre Hopkins would go on to start all 16 games for a Houston Texans team that would end up going 9-7 as J.J. Watt won his second Defensive Player of the Year award in a 3-year span, I believe. This is long before they had Deshaun Watson. I don't even know who their quarterback was at the time. But regardless, Hopkins would finish with 76 receptions, which is 24 more than the year before. He had 1,210 yards. That's the first time he eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark, and of course 1,200. He had six receiving touchdowns. He would not get named to a Pro Bowl, and the Houston Texans would not go on to make the playoffs this year. But more people were starting to recognize DeAndre Hopkins as a really good player in a not super great situation, especially with the quarterback situation that Houston had before Deshaun Watson got there. In 2015, in his age 23 season, he would go on to start all 16 games in a season where the Houston Texans would finish with a 9-7 record, the same record they had the year before, and they would win the AFC South. This would be the year that J.J. Watt won his third Defensive Player of the Year in a 4-year span. And of course, it's worth knowing that just to give context as to like the fact that the defense was a big part of the reason why the Texans made it. But looking at how DeAndre Hopkins fared, he would go on to make his very first Pro Bowl that year in his third year in the league. He finished with 111 receptions for 1,521 receiving yards. Of course, both were career highs at that point. He finished with 11 touchdowns. That's the first time he finished with double-digit touchdowns on the season. And once they made the playoffs, the Houston Texans would actually end up getting blown out. They would get shut out by the Chiefs 30-0, and that was when Alex Smith was the quarterback. Following that season, he would come back for 2016 in his age 24 season. In 2016, in his age 24 season, he would start all 16 games in a season where the Texans would go 9-7 for the second year in a row, winning the AFC South and making the playoffs for the second year in a row. And this is actually the year before they got Deshaun Watson. And the year before they got Deshaun Watson, they would, like I said, they made the playoffs. But in this season, DeAndre Hopkins would start all 16 games. He would finish with 78 receptions for 954 yards and 4 touchdowns. Of course, a lot of his numbers went down. The quarterback situation wasn't necessarily the best, and people started to recognize him as a threat. And it's really tough to have people giving you the best coverage if you don't have necessarily the right quarterback that can deliver it to you. But following this season, this is the last season actually in which DeAndre Hopkins has not been named to a Pro Bowl. The Houston Texans would end up beating the Raiders in the wild card, and then they would end up losing in the divisional round to the Patriots, to give a little bit more context. And then following that season, in 2017, after Deshaun Watson got drafted, DeAndre Hopkins, coming back for his 5th season in Houston, would start 15 of the 16 games. This would be the first time he actually didn't start a game. This season in 2017, the Texans would finish with a 4-12 record. This is the year that J.J. Watt won the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Regardless, DeAndre Hopkins would go on to be named a first-team All-Pro and make his second-team Pro Bowl. He finished with 96 receptions for 1,378 yards. He would finish with 13 touchdowns, which led the NFL and which is his career high to this day. Following this season, like I said, they completely whiffed the playoffs, but Deshaun Watson and at least DeAndre Hopkins, this was the first year of them being together, and it was so magical that for DeAndre Hopkins, just having a quarterback that can get him the ball made him an All-Pro in his very first year with Deshaun Watson. His very next season in 2018, in his age 26 season, his 6th season with Houston, he would start all 16 games in a season where the Texans finished with an 11-5 record. That's the best record that they've had since he had gotten there. in Deshaun Watson's second season, he would give DeAndre Hopkins 115 receptions for 1,572 yards. He would finish with 11 touchdowns. This would be the second season he eclipsed 100 receptions, and 115 is actually tied with his most recent season for the most receptions he's ever had. 1,572 yards is the most receiving yards he's ever put up in a season. 11 touchdowns is the third time in his NFL career, and the most recent time he's put up double-digit touchdowns. And following this 2018 season, in which he was named a Pro Bowler for the third time, a second year in a row, and a third time in a 4-year span, and the second time in a row he was named in first-team All-Pro, the Texans would go on to lose to the Colts in the very first round of the playoffs under Bill O'Brien. Following that season, he would come back for his final season in Houston, his 7th year there. In 2019, he would go on to play. He would start all 15 games in a season in which the Houston Texans went on to finish with a 10-6 record. In this particular season, DeAndre Hopkins would be named he would be named a Pro Bowler and a first-team All-Pro for the third year in a row, and he would be named a Pro Bowler for the fourth time in a 5-year span. In those 15 games he played, he finished with 104 receptions. This was the third time he had eclipsed 100 receptions in his career. 1,165 yards. This is the fifth time he eclipsed 1,000 yards in his 7-year career up to date. He would finish with 7 touchdowns as well, receiving. And following the season, the Texans would go on to beat the Bills in overtime in the first game, and then they would end up getting destroyed by the Chiefs 51-31 as the Chiefs went on to win the Super Bowl that year. Following that year, DeAndre Hopkins came back for what was his most recent season, his age 28 season, and before that season, he would leave Houston and he would get traded to Arizona. There were some disputes he had with Bill O'Brien. For some reason, the Texans decided to keep Bill O'Brien rather than DeAndre Hopkins, which was really something considering Bill O'Brien only lasted 4 games this upcoming season, but I'm not going to get into the politics of it. In his first season with Arizona, under Kyler Murray, who the previous year was named the Offensive Rookie of the Year, DeAndre Hopkins would start all 16 games in a season where he was named a Pro Bowler, by the way. In the season where the Arizona Cardinals finished with an 8-8 record and missed the playoffs just in Cliff Kingsbury's second season being there. They had won 3 more games in the previous year, so of course that's a big improvement. This season, DeAndre Hopkins would finish with 115 receptions, which is actually tied with 2018 for the most receptions he's ever put up in a season. He put up 1,407 receiving yards, which is the third most receiving yards he's ever put up in his career, and 6 receiving touchdowns as well. And following this incredible season, he would be named a Pro Bowler for the 4th year in a row, even though he wasn't named All NFL. And he would be named, in addition to being named a Pro Bowler for the 4th year in a row, he was named, this is the 5th year this is the 5th time in the last 6 seasons he was named a Pro Bowler, and that's right about where we are now. But following this season, they completely whiffed the playoffs, and that would transition us kind of where we are now. DeAndre Hopkins, today, he turned 29. Up until now, I believe if he retired now, he would be a Hall of Famer, but I think he still has a lot more to prove to himself. And considering the Arizona Cardinals are a team that's getting sneakily and quietly, really better, they just added J.J. Watt, his former teammate, and it's very interesting to see how DeAndre Hopkins' career could possibly get better. And it'll be interesting to see what this chapter with Arizona will bring. And like I said, he's only played 1 season there, but I think for this upcoming 2021 NFL season, DeAndre Hopkins, it's a no-brainer that he should be recognized as an elite athlete, an elite wide receiver in the NFL, a league that's famous for having elite wide receivers. I want to thank everyone for listening to all 14 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well, and I want to wish DeAndre Hopkins a happy 29th birthday. If you ever get a chance to catch him, he's wearing number 10 for the Arizona Cardinals, and he'll probably make if you watch a good Cardinals game, he'll probably get about 2 or 3 amazing catches on you, while you're watching. With that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, And once all of today's exhibitions are done, I will come back tomorrow, Monday, June 7th, for another episode of The Elite. I hope all is well, and peace out. Stay elite, and I hope and have a great day. I'll catch you tomorrow.